Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And tonight, by way of introduction of our feature, we're going to start with this. You know I'm going to take any chance I get to play Elmer Bernstein's theme from The Magnificent Seven. And that's because the last of the Magnificent Seven, Robert Vaughn, died recently at the age of 83. Robert Vaughn was a suave, smooth actor, and although he first came to prominence in The Magnificent Seven and also helped James Coburn get a spot in the movie, he later went on to become one of the great TV stars of the 1960s. Here he is in a brief scene from The Magnificent Seven as the burned-out gunfighter lead, discussing the plight of gunfighters with Steve McQueen, who we'll come back to, and Yul Brynner.
Meals you eat in hash houses, 1,000. Home, none. Wife, none. Kids, none. Prospects, 0. Suppose I left anything out?
Yeah. Places you're tied down to, none. People with a hold on you, none. Men you step aside for, none.
Insults swallowed, none. Enemies, none.
No enemies?
Alive.
Yeah, he's a bad dude, but he meets his end in the movie. From there, he didn't get the big movie roles, but he went on to do some television. In fact, he played Laura Petrie's old boyfriend in The Dick Van Dyke Show. But then, at the height of the James Bond craze, in 1964 came this. For those of you who don't know, that was the theme from the Man From U.N.C.L.E. And it gave Robert Vaughn not only his most famous role, but one of the most famous roles in television history.
My name is Napoleon Solo.
Napoleon Solo was the American television James Bond, along with Ilya Kuryakin, the Russian character played by the Scotsman David McCallum. They ruled TV in 1965. They were the #1 show in television in the fall of 1965. They were drawing more fan mail than even Clark Gable got at the height of his career. There was merchandise, magazine articles, everything. And in fact, when the Beatles came in 1966, one of the people they wanted to meet was Robert Vaughn, the Man from U.N.C.L.E. Here Robert Vaughn talks about how he first got the role.
One night we were shooting in Camp Pendleton, and I got a note saying, when you go back to the MGM tonight at the artist's entrance where the guard is, there'll be a script for you to read, and I can pick it up. And Mr. Felton would like to see you in his office in the Thalberg building at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So this was about midnight, and Gary and I were both bachelors at the time, so we went on the Sunset Strip and picked up a couple of young ladies, went over to his house in Laurel Canyon, and I got home about 4:30, having not read the script. So I left for the studio at 7:30, 8 o'clock, drive there, and I literally read the script at red lights. I just returned. The script was called Solo at that time. And I read it, and I walked into the office, and Mr. Felton said, well, what do you think of the script? And I said, well, it's James Bond on television. He said, that's it. He said, don't say that, though, because he said, Ian Fleming and I are friends, and that's going to cause a problem. He said, do you think you'd like to do it? Now, this is really a key thing I'm going to say, of the difference between 1963 in casting or 2007 when things are cast. So this was about 9:05 a.m. in L.A., 12:05 p.m. in New York. Mr. Felton said, get me so-and-so at NBC. Well, Dave Tippett, somebody, I don't know. He said, Dave, he said, Vaughn wants to do it. Silence, puts down the phone, and Felton says to me, call your agent, we'll make a deal. That was it. There was no testing, there was no discussing, there was no meeting dozens of 21-year-old MBAs from Harvard who knew nothing about show business. He just got the part based upon one guy's decision on the West Coast. He told me after we made the deal, he said, well, the reason I stopped to do that to him in the office when we first met, he said, because we're having a little problem. He said, and we want to kind of play down. Matter of fact, when they changed the name of the show, I'm going to take Solo away from it because that's a character in Goldfinger, and we were having litigation problems with Ian Fleming. I think Fleming died somewhere along this period of time. So I learned about the problem after I was already cast. And we shot the pilot the week that Kennedy was killed, or President Kennedy was killed. So we actually shut down shooting. He was killed on my birthday. He was killed on November 22nd, 1963. And by the end of the day, none of us were able to really work. And we stopped shooting about midday on that Friday. And we didn't go back to work till the following Tuesday because it was 4 days in mourning for Kennedy at that time.
Well, Napoleon and Ilya worked for U.N.C.L.E, the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement, and here he explains who their enemy was, Thrush.
And would that be Thrush?
Who's Thrush?
Thrush is an organization that believes the world should have a two-party system. The masters and the slaves.
Well, as fast as the Man from U.N.C.L.E shot up the ratings in the mid-60s, it shot down too. And to a certain extent, it left Robert Vaughn typecast. Couldn't get away from Napoleon Solo. Now, he was still suave, he was still good-looking, and they decided to cast him as a villain. And his most famous villain role was his reuniting with Steve McQueen in the great 1968 movie Bullitt. Steve McQueen is a hard-boiled detective, and Robert Vaughn is a crooked politician out to set him up.
Captain Baker would like to have a word with you. All right, nail him. I want him written off. Lieutenant, don't try to evade the responsibility. In your parlance, you blew it. Now, what went wrong, Lieutenant?
Who else knew where he was?
What?
Who else knew where he was?
What are you implying?
Well, they knew where to look for him, and they used your name to get in.
Are you suggesting I disclosed his whereabouts?
You believe what you want. You work your side of the street, and I'll work mine.
Good chemistry between Steve McQueen and Robert Vaughn. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Robert Vaughn's other great roles as a villain, and those were in Columbo. Gotta give those to Sid. He was a suave bad guy twice, and here he is, trying to outsmart Peter Falk as Hayden Danziger.
Why didn't he just throw the gun overboard? Lieutenant, I can see you don't know much about ships. He didn't have time. Well, the murder took place during an intermission.
That is correct.
Now, a ship is a much larger place than people think. Well, maybe he left the bandstand, he made his costume change, spent whatever minutes with the girl, and he had to rush back to the bandstand so he wouldn't be late. Yes, that sounds very plausible. So, he stashed the gun in the nearest convenient place, the laundry room. Right?
But why didn't he just open the porthole in the cabin and toss the gun in the water?
The portholes are part of the decor. They don't open.
They don't?
No way.
Oh, well, you know, Mr. Danziger, that's a very good theory. That's probably exactly the way it happened. You probably couldn't tell, but I never been on a boat before.
I couldn't tell, no. Listen, I'm going to get back to my game. And when I'm done, I get hopping on your L theory.
Well, of course, Robert Vaughn is the murderer, and of course, Peter Falk nabs him at the end. If I was Peter Falk, I'd just arrest Robert Vaughn every time I saw him at the beginning of the show. It would have saved us a lot of time and effort. We're going to move on now to Leon Russell, who died recently at the age of 75. Born Claude Russell Bridges in Lawton, Oklahoma. He hung out in Tulsa, and he was one of the first supersession men, one of the great supersession men. For a while, he was part of the Wrecking Crew, and he worked for everyone from Jerry Lee Lewis and Phil Spector to Joe Cocker, Bob Dylan, and the Rolling Stones. He also had a great solo career as a countryish blues gospel performer. He was a child prodigy. He studied classical piano at the age of 3 till the age of 14, and then he learned the trumpet and formed his own band in Tulsa and lied about his age to land a job at a Tulsa nightclub where he played with Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, who later became the band. Soon after that, Jerry Lee Lewis took Leon Russell's band on tour, and in 1958 he moved to L.A., where he learned guitar from the great Rick Nelson sideman James Burton, and he did studio work with Dorsey Burnett, Glenn Campbell, and others, and that's when he became part of the Wrecking Crew. He played on nearly all of Phil Spector's hit sessions. He also played on Bob Lynn's Elusive Butterfly, which we've played in his podcast, Herb Alpert's A Taste of Honey, and the Byrds' Mr. Tambourine Man. In the 60s, he also arranged some hit records. He arranged one of my favorites, This Diamond Ring, which I won't play tonight. He also became a close friend of Delaney and Bonnie Bramlett, and in 1967 he built his own studio in L.A. He occasionally appeared on the TV rock show Shindig, on the Shindogs Band, and here he is in 1965 when he still had well-groomed hair doing a Hank Williams classic on Shindig.
You gotta go, you gotta go down by. We just one real mile. We're gonna be gone, we're gonna have a little fun on the line. Well, don't go lying, Billy Gumbo.
You can see that Jerry Lee Lewis influence there. Well, not long after that, he moved out of pop and he moved into a more country vein, grew his hair long, and he became sort of a country hippie. It's no coincidence that he also became friends around this time with Willie Nelson. We'll play some of him and Willie Nelson together, but at first I thought we'd play a couple of his other best-known tunes. Here's one he wrote that Joe Cocker covered, and we did it in the Joe Cocker podcast. And here's Leon Russell singing Delta Lady.
Oh, my Lord, cornbread now, wow, well, you longing in your soft and pretty old Delta. Oh, your mind, Delta Lady.
You can tell Leon Russell got a little harder edge over time. Here's a Leon Russell tune that George Benson performed and won the 1977 Grammy for Record of the Year, this Masquerade.
Are we really happy here with this lonely game we're playing? Looking for words to say. We're lost in a masquerade.
And let's come back to a couple of duets he did with Willie. How about the two of them doing a little Elvis?
Well, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. Down at the end of a lonely street, that Heartbreak Hotel. And I get so lonely, baby. I get so lonely, baby. I get so lonely I could die. Although it's always crowded, you still can find some room. A broken heart and a love vow to cry away the blues.
How about the two of them doing a little Rolling Stones? Leon takes the lead in Jumpin' Jack Flash. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. And to close on Leon Russell, I'm going to play two of my favorite songs that he wrote. The first is him performing in 1971, A Song for You.
I've been so many places in my life and time. I've sung a lot of songs, I made some bad rhymes. I've acted down a lot of stages with 10,000 people watching. Whoa. But we're alone now and I'm singing this song to you.
The song has been covered by a lot of people, from Andy Williams to Ray Charles. In fact, Ray Charles won a 1993 Grammy for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance for it. In 2005, a duet between Herbie Hancock and Christina Aguilera landed a Grammy nomination. And one of the groups that covered it and did a pretty good job with it was the Carpenters, who were vastly underrated musically, and their association with Leon Russell tells you that. And to close, I'm going to play a song that they covered of his. It's a superb rendition of his song, Superstar.
Don't you remember you told me you loved me, baby? You said you'd be coming back this way again, baby. Baby, 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 oh baby. I love you, I really do.